You were born in the year 1238 under the high vaulted ceilings of your family's ancestral hall, to the sound of church bells and the soft sobs of a tired mother. You never met her. She died of childbed fever 2 days later. The wet nurse raised you, the servants clothed and bathed you, the priest ensured your first words were half prayers. You were born into nobility, yes, but not into peace, nor love, nor freedom. As a child, your days were spoken for before you could walk. Tutors drilled Latin into your mouth and fear into your heart. You learned how to hold a quill and a sword before you learned how to smile without asking permission. You were reminded daily that you were not a boy, but an heir, a vessel of lineage, a chess piece in your father's long and bitter game with neighboring houses. Your toys were maps, your lullabies were sermons. At 12, you were sent away, to a colder castle under a sterner lord. You were there not to learn, but to remind him that your father's army stood close. You dined beneath banners and kept your back straight even while your hands trembled. You sparred with other boys like you, sons of war-hardened fathers, all fighting for something none of you could name. You learned to hide pain. You learned that to flinch was to invite disgrace. You bled in silence. When your father died, slain not on the battlefield, but slowly, by kidney stones and pride, you became lord of your house. 17, armored in titles you didn't ask for, you stood before your tenants and swore oaths you barely understood. The coffers were thin, the crops failing, and the castle was more ruin than refuge. Your vassals grumbled, your steward lied. You smiled through it all because smiling meant power, or the illusion of it. Your marriage was arranged before you even returned home. Lady Isolde was kind, clever, and a stranger. She gave you a son and a daughter. She gave you loyalty, though not affection. Still, you counted yourself lucky. Other lords had worse. The King's War came when you were 26. You raised your levy, emptied your stores, and marched beneath your house's tattered banners. The war wasn't yours, but you fought it anyway, because your name was inked in ancient treaties, and your silence would mean forfeiture of lands you'd never even walked. You watched your friends die, screaming in mud, and your knights carried you back half dead with a lance wound in your thigh. It festered for weeks, but you lived. You always lived. Until you started to die. The years after the war were filled with whispers, that you'd grown weak, that your son, now a boy of 12, was too soft, that perhaps your house had run its course. You held court daily, signed decrees, collected taxes, hanged thieves. You prayed, you bribed, you bled your people dry to feed the king's ambition and your own survival.
When the fever came, it was sudden. It burned through your body like your youth once did. The physicians bled you, dosed you with crushed emeralds and frog hearts. Nothing worked. You saw your daughter cry, and your son turn pale, and your wife kiss your forehead like a priest might kiss a corpse. You died at 35, rotting from within. They buried you beneath the chapel you funded, your name carved in stone, your deeds sung by men who barely knew you. The peasants nodded with respect. The king did not send a letter. Your son inherited the same burden you once carried, and so the story began again. You were born noble, but you never lived free.